A single mother and her little daughter were thrown out of the church after the wedding until a millionaire stepped forward and the sunlight filtered through the stained glass windows of the grand cathedral, painting the white marble floor in hues of gold and crimson. Rows of guests sat poised in silent admiration as the bride, draped in a cascading gown of satin and lace, walked slowly down the aisle. Classical music swelled, echoing beneath the towering arches. Everything about the wedding exuded perfection, wealth, grace, and power. At the very back of the church, on the farthest wooden bench, Melissa sat quietly with her 6-year-old daughter, Linda. Their clothes were simple, clean, modest. Melissa wore a faded navy dress, her long hair tied back neatly. Linda wore a second-hand white dress, slightly big for her frame, but her eyes were wide with wonder. "Look, sweetheart," Melissa whispered, pointing toward the altar. "She looks like a princess, doesn't she?" Linda leaned in, hands clasped. "She's so pretty, Mommy. Will I get to wear a dress like that one day?" Melissa smiled, though there was a flicker of sadness in her eyes. "One day, baby, if you want it." The ceremony moved forward. Vows were exchanged. The couple kissed. Applause broke out. Melissa and Linda stayed seated, watching until the last guest rose. As the crowd began to move outside, Melissa hesitated, then stood. "Come," she said gently. "Let's take one quick picture up front, just to remember." Linda nodded eagerly. They tiptoed down the aisle, past empty pews toward the flower-laden altar. Melissa knelt beside her daughter, lifting her phone. "Smile, baby." Click. "Just one more," she whispered. But before she could take it, a shrill voice rang out behind them. "Excuse me, just what do you think you're doing?" Melissa froze. She turned slowly to see a tall woman in an emerald green gown, diamond necklace gleaming, eyebrows arched in disdain. She was the bride's older sister, well known in local circles for her sharp tongue and colder heart. I'm sorry," Melissa stammered. "We were just crashing the ceremony," the woman sneered. "Who even let you in? This is not a shelter. And you," she pointed at Linda, "this child, do not think you can dress up and blend in. People like you do not belong in places like this." Linda instinctively hid behind her mother. Melissa's throat tightened. Please, she just wanted to see, oh, spare me, a single mother, dragging her illegitimate child into a sacred place? You honestly thought you could sneak in, steal a moment, pretend you belonged. Pathetic. Melissa's face flushed with shame. Tears stung her eyes. "We weren't trying to offend anyone, she wanted to feel special for one day. Then find a fantasy land for that," the woman spat. "This is a real wedding for real families. Get out before you bring misfortune to the couple." Linda began to cry, her small hands gripping Melissa's dress tightly. "Mommy, are we bad?" she whispered. Melissa couldn't answer. Her voice was caught in her chest. Her eyes burned. Then, from the aisle, a low voice cut through the air. "Enough." A hush fell across the space. A man stepped forward, tall, sharply dressed in a black suit, dark hair just slightly tousled. His presence alone commanded silence. Guests turned to look. Some whispered. It was Nathaniel Reed. Millionaire. Elusive. Untouchable. He walked slowly toward them. His eyes did not leave Melissa's face. He stopped beside her. "I'll ask again," he said, looking at the woman. "Who told you she had no husband?" The woman blinked. "What?" He turned to the crowd. "Who said this woman was alone?" No one answered. "Because as of this moment," he continued, voice steady and sure, "Melissa and her daughter are with me." Gasps broke out. A murmur swept through the guests. The woman stammered, You're joking." Nathaniel didn't flinch. He removed his jacket and draped it gently over Melissa's shoulders. Then he knelt before Linda and produced a white handkerchief from his pocket. He wiped her tears with care. "Hey there," he said softly. "You're not bad. You're just braver than most people in this room." He stood, lifting Linda into his arms effortlessly. She clung to him, her crying fading. Melissa looked up at him, stunned. "Why? she whispered. Nathaniel met her eyes, because no one, especially not a child, should be made to feel like less than they are. With that, he placed his hand gently on Melissa's back and began to lead them down the aisle, through the stunned, silent crowd. The wedding was over, but something far more unforgettable had just begun. The late afternoon sun dipped low behind the cathedral as Melissa stood with Linda in the gravel parking lot, her mind still spinning. The jacket still hung on her shoulders, heavy with warmth and confusion. Nathaniel stood nearby, arms folded loosely, watching her quietly. She turned to face him, voice tight. "Why did you do that?" He met her gaze without flinching. "Because I cannot stand to see a child treated like a stain on someone else's ceremony." Melissa looked down at Linda, who clung to her hand, still silent but watching Nathaniel with wide eyes. "You barely know us." "That's true," he said calmly. "But I didn't need to know you to know she didn't deserve to be spoken to like that, and you didn't deserve to be humiliated for being a good mother." Melissa pressed her lips together, unsure how to respond. After a beat, Nathaniel reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. "I'm not trying to make things more complicated," he said, "but if you ever want to talk, or if you're looking for work, I host a lot of charity events. We always need people who know how to treat others with respect." She stared at the card. His name was printed in silver foil, Nathaniel Reed, Reed Holdings. "I'm not some project," she said quietly. "No," he said, "you're someone who deserves better." He gave a small nod, then turned and walked toward a waiting car, disappearing behind tinted windows. Melissa stood there, the card clutched in her hand, heart pounding. That evening, back in their apartment, Melissa helped Linda out of her dress and into pajamas. They ate peanut butter sandwiches on the couch, the cathedral still playing in both their minds. "Mommy?" Linda asked, eyes thoughtful. "Is that man your friend?" Melissa smiled faintly. "No, baby, just someone who was kind." "He looks like my drawings of Daddy." Melissa blinked. "Your drawings?" Linda nodded. "Remember the ones I made, with the tall man who reads bedtime stories and brings flowers?" Melissa reached for her bag and pulled out the drawing Linda had made the week before, but when she opened the folder it was gone. In its place, tucked neatly inside the inner lining of the jacket Nathaniel had placed on her shoulders, was the drawing. Melissa's breath caught. He must have picked it up when Linda dropped it in the church. He had returned it without saying a word. She stared at the sketch. The man, drawn in crayon, had kind eyes, just like Nathaniel. 1 week later, Melissa sat at the edge of her bed, Nathaniel's card in her hand. Bills lay scattered around her, rent due, tips from waitressing not nearly enough. Linda was asleep in the other room, her small form curled around a second-hand stuffed bear. Melissa took a deep breath and picked up her phone. The line rang once. "Mr. Reed speaking. It's Melissa," she said, "from the church." His voice softened instantly. "I remember. I'm calling because you mentioned a job." "Yes," he said. "Actually, it's perfect timing. I'm hosting a fundraiser next weekend at my residence in Westchester. I need someone I can trust to help manage the logistics. I'd like you to come." Melissa hesitated. "With Linda?" "Absolutely," he said without pause. "There's a garden, plenty of space for her to play. I'd love to meet her properly." Silence stretched for a moment. "All right," Melissa said at last. "We'll be there." "Good," Nathaniel replied. "I'll send a car." As she hung up, Melissa felt a twinge of something unfamiliar. Hope. It was fragile, like a flame flickering against wind, but it was there. Across the apartment, Linda stirred and mumbled in her sleep. "Daddy brought flowers again." Melissa's hand moved to her heart. She didn't believe in fairy tales, but sometimes kindness looked a lot like destiny. Melissa had never seen Linda take to someone so quickly. From the moment they stepped into the sun-drenched courtyard of Nathaniel's Westchester estate, the little girl clung to his side like she had known him all her life. She called him Tall Mister at first, then not long after, Mr. Tall, and eventually settled on Uncle Tall, which made Nathaniel chuckle every time. "You know he has a real name?" Melissa teased gently one afternoon as they walked the garden path together. Linda beamed, skipping ahead. "But he's so tall, Mommy." Nathaniel followed a few paces behind, hands in his pockets, watching them with a small, unguarded smile. He had never been called uncle before, and certainly never with that much affection. Each day, Melissa worked alongside his event team preparing for the charity gala, while Linda roamed the grounds with a sketchpad in hand. She would settle on a bench and draw whatever caught her eye: the swan fountain, the big piano, or most often, Nathaniel standing next to Melissa with a stick figure heart floating above their heads. At night, after the house quieted down, Nathaniel found himself reading to Linda. It began accidentally, Melissa running late from the kitchen setup, Linda waiting in the guest room. "Do you want me to read something while you wait for Mommy?" he had asked. She handed him a worn copy of The Little Prince. He read. The next night she asked for it again. By the third night she was falling asleep against his shoulder before he even finished chapter 2. Nathaniel never said anything. He would just sit there perfectly still until she was deep in dreams, then gently lay her down and cover her with the blanket Melissa had brought from home. In the morning, Melissa often found him lingering near the kitchen, sipping coffee. "She didn't wake you, did she?" she asked one morning. Nathaniel shook his head. "She dreams better when someone reads." There was a softness to his tone that made Melissa pause. As the days passed, Nathaniel started collecting Linda's drawings. The first few he pinned to the refrigerator with magnets. Then more appeared on his study corkboard. Some he kept in a drawer. He never told anyone why. In one drawing, Nathaniel noticed something peculiar. Linda had drawn herself eating chocolate next to him. Both had little hearts and the same caption, "We don't like carrots." It was true. At dinner the night before, both he and Linda had pushed their carrots aside without noticing the other. And it wasn't just the carrots. Both preferred dark chocolate over milk. Both were left-handed. Both scrunched their noses the same way when concentrating. Melissa began to notice it too. One afternoon, as Nathaniel crouched beside Linda, helping her tie a shoelace, Melissa stood a few feet away and stared. Really stared. The tilt of Linda's head. The way Nathaniel gently tapped her chin to correct it. It was the same. There was no denying the likeness. She had chalked it up to coincidence at first, but the small habits, the mirrored gestures, even the way they laughed, low and soft, were too alike. Nathaniel, for his part, said little about it, but he observed everything. The way Melissa twisted her hair when nervous, the pink clip Linda wore every day, the exact way Melissa folded napkins. Once he even folded them the same without realizing. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Melissa joined him on the porch, watching Linda chase butterflies. "He's happy here," Melissa said. Nathaniel nodded. "She's a remarkable girl." "You remember everything about her," she said after a pause. "And about me." "I watch the people I care about," he replied simply. Melissa turned to him. "Why?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he watched Linda, who was now laughing as a butterfly landed on her sleeve. "I don't know," he said quietly, "but when she calls me Uncle Tall, something about it feels right." Melissa said nothing, but something deep in her chest stirred, a warmth she had not allowed herself to feel in a very long time. The evening was unusually quiet. The charity gala had ended, the guests had left, and the house had fallen into the kind of stillness only found after too much noise. Nathaniel stood by the French doors, a glass of wine in his hand, watching moonlight stretch across the lawn. Melissa entered the room, barefoot, her hair down, wearing one of the oversized sweaters she had borrowed from the guest closet. Linda had gone to bed early after a long day helping arrange decorations and handing out name tags. "I thought you would be asleep," Nathaniel said gently without turning around. "I couldn't," she said. "Too many thoughts." He gestured toward the empty seat across from him. She joined him in silence, tucking her feet beneath her. For a while, neither of them spoke. The night didn't ask them to. Then Melissa said quietly, "Can I tell you something I've never told anyone?" Nathaniel looked at her, his brow softening. "Of course." She ran a hand through her hair, her fingers trembling slightly. "When I was 21, I worked as a housekeeper at a resort upstate. One summer night there was a party, a lot of music, champagne. I wasn't supposed to be there, but one of the girls invited me." She paused. "There was a man, kind, a little lost, but warm. We talked, danced. He never gave me his full name, just signed a napkin with the letter N when he left the next morning." Nathaniel's breath caught in his throat. He didn't speak. He couldn't. "I never saw him again," Melissa continued. "And I didn't go looking. I didn't want him to think I wanted anything from him. But a few weeks later, I found out I was pregnant. I kept the napkin for a while, but life got hard. I let it go." She laughed, but it sounded hollow. "It's silly, right? I never told anyone, not even Linda. I didn't want her to grow up feeling like a mistake." Nathaniel stared at her, something tightening in his chest. The timeline, the place, the napkin, the letter. A resort in upstate New York. A blurry memory of music, warm lips, and a woman who cried softly in the dark. He remembered her eyes. He hadn't remembered her name. But now, her voice matched the memory. Her laugh was the same. Linda. Suddenly, it wasn't just coincidence anymore. It was a possibility. Nathaniel said nothing. He waited until Melissa went to bed, quietly shutting her door. Then he walked to Linda's room. She was asleep, curled around her stuffed bear, her thumb resting near her cheek. Her tiny breaths came evenly. Nathaniel knelt beside the bed, his hands trembling slightly. He gently reached out and plucked a few strands of her hair from the pillow, his throat tight with emotion. He sent the sample to his private lab that night. Confidential, urgent, no name attached. 3 days later, the results arrived. 99.9% probability, biological paternity confirmed. Nathaniel sat in his office for hours after, staring at the paper, unable to move. His hands shook. His heart pounded. He thought of the way Linda laughed, how she scrunched her nose, how she hated carrots. He thought of the first time she reached for his hand without hesitation. His daughter. She was his daughter. He didn't sleep that night. He just sat on the edge of her bed, watching her breathe, watching her chest rise and fall. He didn't dare touch her, didn't dare speak. But in the silence, something broke open inside him, and for the first time in years, Nathaniel Reed cried, not out of grief or loss, but from a love so sudden and deep it stole the air from his lungs. His daughter, and her mother, the woman he had let slip through his fingers once, was already in his life again. Now he had to decide, would he tell the truth, or would he wait? Until she believed he was there not because of blood, but because of love. Nathaniel did not tell her. Not yet. He had the truth in his hands, folded and stored in the top drawer of his study. The DNA report that confirmed what his heart already knew. Linda was his daughter, but instead of announcing it, he chose a different path, one that required patience and a quiet kind of love. He started waking early. When Melissa came down to the kitchen before the rest of the house stirred, she found him already there, sleeves rolled up, slicing fruit with practiced precision. "You cook?" she asked one morning, raising an eyebrow. "I try," he replied, placing a bowl of strawberries in front of her. "You've been doing everything. Thought I'd even the scales." She laughed softly and took a piece. "Not bad." They moved around the kitchen like dancers, learning each other's rhythm. He noticed how she hummed when she stirred, how she double-checked expiration dates even if the item was brand new. She noticed the way he handled eggs like glass and how he cleaned as he went without ever being asked. In quiet moments over coffee, Nathaniel began to share fragments of himself, pieces most people never got. "I was raised in foster care," he said one morning, eyes on the rising steam. "No parents. Bounced around a lot." Melissa didn't respond immediately. She simply reached across the table and placed her hand over his. "I'm sorry," she said. He nodded once. "It teaches you things, mostly how to expect people to leave." But she didn't pull her hand away. Later that week, he handed her a wrapped book with a simple bow. Inside was a worn but beautiful copy of a Spanish novel, Cien Años de Soledad. "I remembered you said you wanted to study Spanish again one day," he said. "Figured this might help." Melissa ran her fingers over the pages. "I told you that once, months ago." "I remember things," he said quietly. Her heart stirred, an ache she'd long taught herself to ignore. But it wasn't just what he said, it was what he did. He walked her to the garden when her legs ached after long shifts. He knew how she liked her tea, light, no sugar. He kept a shawl draped over her chair on the porch when the wind picked up, and he made Linda laugh in a way Melissa never could. One evening, after dinner, the three of them played a silly game Linda had made up called Royal Family. Melissa wore a paper crown. Linda held a wooden spoon like a scepter. "If Mommy is the queen and I'm the princess," Linda said, crawling into Nathaniel's lap, "what does that make you?" Nathaniel looked at her, then at Melissa. He smiled, the kind that reached deep. "I'm the one who can't live without either of you," he said. Melissa blinked, her breath catching. Linda giggled and declared, "Then you're the royal knight." "Something like that," he whispered, brushing Linda's hair from her face. Melissa watched him cradle her daughter who shared his eyes, his left-handedness, his crooked smile. She should have asked more, should have questioned the way they mirrored each other, but she didn't, because in that moment, all she could feel was warmth, and the terrifying, beautiful thought that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone anymore. The storm came in fast. Rain lashed against the tall windows of the estate, thunder rolling like a distant drum. The wind howled, bending the trees, and inside the power flickered once, then steadied. Melissa was curled on the couch in the den, wrapped in a blanket, her face flushed. She had said it was just a headache earlier, but by evening her body had given in to fever. Linda had gone to sleep hours before, tucked safely in the guest room upstairs, unaware. Nathaniel knelt beside Melissa, gently touching her forehead. "You should be in bed," he said softly. Melissa gave a weak smile. "You fuss too much. I'm allowed to fuss when you're burning up," he said, already moving to the kitchen. 10 minutes later, he returned with a tray. A mug of chamomile tea, just the way she liked it, honey, no lemon, and a book. The same old Spanish novel he'd gifted her weeks ago. She blinked up at him, eyes glassy but amused. "You're too good at this." He sat beside her, placing the tray on the table. "I pay attention." "You always do," she whispered. He handed her the tea, then opened the book, his voice calm and steady as he began to read. The soft rhythm of the Spanish words, the scent of warm tea, the quiet between thunderclaps. It wrapped the room in a hush that neither of them wanted to break. After a while, Melissa leaned her head against his shoulder. He didn't move, didn't speak. "I'm sorry I'm a mess," she murmured. "You're not," he said. "You're just human." She looked up at him, her face close now, eyes searching. Her voice came soft, hesitant. "Have you ever felt truly loved, Nathaniel?" His throat tightened. He thought of cold hallways and group homes, of birthday cards that never came, of success without anyone to share it. He met her gaze. "Never," he said quietly. "Not until you and Linda walked into that church." Melissa's breath hitched. Something shifted in the air between them, soft and electric all at once. Nathaniel reached up, brushing a strand of damp hair from her cheek. Then slowly, as if drawn by something beyond choice, he kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, reverent. Then deeper. Melissa leaned into him, her hand finding his, their fingers tangling. The kiss said what neither had dared speak aloud. It was safety, it was promise, it was the breath they had both been holding for far too long. When they finally parted, Melissa didn't move from his arms. But Nathaniel's eyes darkened with something else. Weight. Hesitation. "There's something I haven't told you," he said softly. She stiffened slightly, pulling back just enough to look at him. He held her gaze. "You deserve the truth. You've always deserved it." Melissa's heart began to race. Nathaniel took a breath. Linda? She's mine. Silence. Melissa blinked once, then again. What? What do you mean? I didn't know, not at first, he said. But I remembered. That summer. The resort, you told me about it, and it all came back. I ran the test. The results were clear. He waited for the anger, the disbelief. But Melissa just sat there, eyes wide, one hand unconsciously pressed to her chest. You're sure? She whispered. He nodded. 100%. Tears welled in her eyes. She shook her head slowly, not in denial, but from the shock of it all. You've known, and still treated us like we mattered. Because you do, he said. Not because of biology, because you're the family I didn't know I was waiting for. Melissa covered her mouth, tears slipping down her cheeks. Then, after a beat, she leaned forward, resting her forehead against his, and whispered, So what now? Nathaniel closed his eyes. Now, we begin again. As something real. The storm outside raged on, but inside, two hearts had finally spoken the truth, and nothing would ever be the same. The rain had stopped by morning, but the storm had not. Melissa stood by the window, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the horizon beyond the estate's garden. She had not slept, not really. Her mind raced with images, Nathaniel's face as he confessed, Linda's laughter echoing in the hallways, the kiss they had shared like it was the start of something sacred, and then, the truth. Linda was his daughter, and he had known. She turned when she heard his footsteps. He stopped just inside the doorway. Melissa. Her voice was low, trembling. How long? Nathaniel swallowed. 3 weeks, and you said nothing. I wanted to, he said, but I was afraid. Afraid I'd leave? No. Afraid you'd think I stayed only because I had to. She blinked rapidly. Did you? No, he said firmly. I stayed because I didn't want to be anywhere else. She let out a bitter laugh. So you thought withholding the truth would somehow make me feel safer? I thought it would give us time, he said, stepping closer. Time to grow into something real before it got complicated. Her eyes met his, fierce and wounded. You kissed me knowing you were her father. I kissed you because I love you. She looked away, her jaw tightening. You should have told me. I know. The silence between them turned sharp. Then she whispered, Would you have ever told me if I hadn't asked? Nathaniel hesitated. Yes, but not if you believed the only reason I stayed was biology. Her voice broke. You gave me everything, and now I don't know what was real. It was all real, he said, every moment. But she was already walking past him toward the stairs. By the next afternoon, Melissa and Linda were gone. No note, no forwarding address, just a folded drawing left on the kitchen table, a crayon sketch of the three of them beneath a tree, hands held, hearts above their heads. Nathaniel sat with that drawing for hours. He did not call, he did not chase, but he did not stay silent either. 1 week later he stood before a wall of cameras, reporters packed into the press hall at the Reed Foundation headquarters. The room buzzed with speculation, whispers of scandal, surprise, and secrets. Nathaniel stepped up to the podium, calm, collected, and utterly changed. I don't usually speak publicly, he began, but there are some truths that deserve to be said aloud. He looked into the cameras. There's a little girl out there named Linda. She is my daughter. I didn't know until recently, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Gasps rippled through the room. Cameras clicked faster. I also want to say this, he continued, voice steady. I didn't fall in love because of that truth. I fell in love long before I knew it. With her mother, Melissa. Reporters sat frozen, pens paused mid-air. She's the strongest person I've ever known. And she didn't need me to save her. She just needed someone who would see her, really see her, and I did. He paused. I didn't stay out of obligation. I stayed because they are my family, and because, for the first time in my life, I believe I deserve to have one. He stepped back from the microphone, ignoring the shouted questions, the flashing lights, the chaos he had just unleashed. Because it didn't matter what the world thought. Only 2 people in the world needed to hear those words. And he prayed they had. Melissa sat alone on the worn couch of her friend's apartment, the soft hum of the television filling the room. Linda lay curled beside her, head in her mother's lap, a blanket draped over her small frame. On screen, Nathaniel stood behind a podium, the cameras flashing, microphones pointed toward him like weapons of expectation. He looked calm, but Melissa could see the tremble in his hand as he spoke. "There's a little girl out there named Linda. She is my daughter." Melissa's breath caught, tears spilled before she could stop them. Linda stirred. "Mommy, are you crying?" Melissa wiped her face quickly. "I'm okay, sweetheart." Linda sat up, blinking at the screen. "That's Mr. Tall." Melissa smiled faintly. "Yes, that's Nathaniel." They watched in silence as he continued, words no longer guarded by fear. "I didn't fall in love because of that truth. I fell in love long before I knew it, with her mother, Melissa." Melissa felt her heart twist and unfold all at once. Linda leaned into her side. "We don't have to hide anymore, right?" the little girl asked softly. Melissa kissed her forehead. "No, baby, we don't." 3 days later, on Linda's 7th birthday, Melissa returned. They stepped out of a black car in front of the Reed estate. The iron gates were open. The staff was lined along the driveway, balloons tied to garden lights, music drifting gently in the background. Linda wore a pale blue dress that fluttered in the breeze. Melissa held her hand tightly. The front doors opened. Nathaniel stood waiting. He didn't smile at first, he just looked at Melissa, unsure if he was dreaming. Then Linda let go of her mother's hand and ran toward him. "Daddy!" He caught her midair, arms wrapping around her as if she might vanish again. When he looked over her shoulder and met Melissa's eyes, the pain, the love, the forgiveness passed between them in silence. She nodded once. And the weight on his chest finally lifted. That evening, the garden transformed into a fairy tale. There were twinkling lights overhead, a chocolate fountain in the corner, and a table piled with books, dolls, and tiny wrapped boxes for Linda. Children ran across the lawn, laughter echoing against the hedges. Melissa stood by the koi pond, watching Linda play. Nathaniel approached from behind and gently placed a hand on her back. "She's happy," he said. Melissa nodded. "She's home." He paused. Then, without preamble, he dropped to one knee. Melissa's breath caught. He didn't hold a ring, just her hand. "Today is the day our daughter was born," he said softly. "The day my world changed, even if I didn't know it yet." Her eyes filled. "But the love of my life," he continued, voice steady now, "was born into mine the day she stood up in a church and held her daughter's hand in front of people who didn't deserve to witness their strength." The garden fell silent. Nathaniel looked up at her. "Melissa, I don't need a ceremony or a stage. I just need you. Will you be my home?" Tears rolled down her cheeks. Her voice trembled. "Yes." Linda rushed toward them, clapping her hands. "Kiss her, Daddy, like in the movies." Laughter erupted. Nathaniel stood, pulling Melissa into a kiss full of relief, of joy, of something permanent. Linda hugged both of them tightly. "Now our family is real, right?" Nathaniel looked down at her. It always was. That night, as the sky darkened and stars began to bloom, someone brought out a camera for one final picture. Melissa stood between Nathaniel and Linda, all 3 of them smiling, not for the camera, but because they had finally stopped running. They didn't need applause. They didn't need perfect timing. They just needed each other. Because love, Melissa had learned, did not always arrive on schedule, but when it was real, it stayed, not because of vows, not because of blood, but because it chose you, again and again. If this story touched your heart like it touched ours, take a moment to breathe it in, because sometimes the most powerful stories are not about grand gestures, but about the quiet, courageous choices we make to love, forgive, and begin again. Melissa, Nathaniel, and little Linda remind us that no past is too broken for healing, no truth too heavy for love, and no family too unconventional to be real. If you believe in second chances, in love that finds you when you least expect it, and in the kind of strength that only grows from struggle, then this story was meant for you. Subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories for more emotional, heartfelt tales that stay with you long after the screen fades to black. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss the next journey. And share this video with someone who still believes in the power of love, no matter where it begins, because here, every story begins with the heart.